So SQL Server availability groups. These are getting more and more popular. In fact, it is incredibly rare these days for me to speak to a customer that doesn't mention them. It seems like it used to be about a year and a half ago, everyone was experimenting with them, exploring them, thinking about them, and only the most forward-thinking, leading edge shops were using them in production. Now that has shifted where I'd say probably 50% of the customers that I speak with have availability groups deployed in production at this point. And the other 50% or 49% are talking about it, experimenting with it, considering it. They're looking at it in some way, shape, or form. It seems like the trend is definitely going towards anything that needs remote site recovery is going towards SQL Server availability groups. Just like with Microsoft Exchange years ago when they introduced DAG. Instead of doing Microsoft Exchange failover clusters, everything went to DAG. And at first, all the storage people were scratching their heads. Why would you do that? You need 2 full copies then. And the answer was storage was cheap and the process was way more reliable, less buggy, less complex than the failover clusters were. I'm seeing that same trend happening with SQL Server and availability groups right now. So what we've done with SQL Server availability groups is, first of all, we've built awareness into the Actifio connector. So when you run a discovery, it sees databases that are in availability groups and they show up in the UI under availability groups. And this is important because in the UI today, everything shows up under this source instance that it's under, except databases and availability groups. Why? Well, because availability groups aren't tied to a single instance, right? They are in multiple instances. One primary and one or more, 0 or more secondary, I guess 1 or more secondaries. And the interesting thing about this is customers are so accustomed to backups being very high impact that Microsoft built into the availability group structure, architecture, the ability to run backups from the secondary instead of the primary to help minimize that impact on production performance and response time. And they built in functionality so that you can not just back up the database from the secondary, but you can even back up and truncate transaction logs from the secondary. And it'll send the truncate command over to the primary, and only the logs that have been processed on the secondary get truncated from both all at once, so that to the backup vendor, it's supposed to be seamless. Just run the backup on the secondary and everything just works. Microsoft put a lot of effort and time into that. The thing that's ironic about it is the technologies that are coming out now, and in particular Actifio, they make it so that there isn't really a big impact on the production anyway. So the very thing that was the driver behind backing up from the secondaries, the big performance impact, we had already addressed. Nonetheless, it is just as common for me to talk to a customer who's looking at or using availability groups as it is for me to see them say, I want to run the backups on the secondary. And so we built this awareness where we discover availability groups separately, and you can choose where you want to run those backups from, the primary or the secondary or any of the particular nodes. Most often, even though it's not necessary, most often people say, I'm going to back up from the secondary. And so in that scenario, it's going to work exactly the same way with the bitmap and with mounting disks and capturing the data into the Actifio appliance. It's just getting it from the secondary instead of the primary. And if the secondary and primary are in different locations, the customer typically uses something like stream snap replication to get that data to the opposite location. So site A might be their primary production site. They're actually running backups at site B off of the availability group secondary and replicating it to site A. This has a benefit, and it has a little bit of a penalty. The benefit is comfort level. People are more comfortable running the backups from the secondary. They feel like it gives them a higher level of isolation against problems with the backup impacting production. The penalty is your recovery point for local. So you're at production, a backup ran, and you want to access the data in that backup to get something out of it, to do some investigation into a problem that's been reported. You either have to wait for the backup to be replicated back to the primary site, since the backup happened at the secondary, or you can do that investigation by mounting to a server at the secondary site, at the site B, right? So you might never be impacted by this if the properly sized environment is deployed, where your backups run and replication finishes and all that before you ever come in the morning. Then it's a non-issue. But you do have that slight lag in your RPO at your primary site because you're not backing up there. It's actually backing up elsewhere and replicating there.
Thank you for joining us for another YouTube Tech Tip video. If you like the content you're seeing on this channel, please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you will be alerted to any future content.